Here's another example of a low impact conditioning and motor control at body weight. This is quite a long video, so I won't play all of it. But effectively, we're going to do a drill which is called a reciprocal split squat pattern. Okay. The job of this elastic band is to introduce instability in the coronal and transverse plane. Now, Cameron's job here is to express control of the hip extension and flexion in the sagittal plane while the band wants to disturb that control. Cam, go ahead and stand up. Well, he's not going to stand up just yet because I'm going to describe what's happening. That band wants to rotate him into flexion and rotation of the trunk, which means his trunk extensors and trunk anti-rotators have to control him. Now it's self-limiting, which means if he gets it wrong, he falls over. You'll see that the first repetition he struggled and he fell over to the right. The second repetition, his body has learned how to control that trunk. What I can do is I can change the hand position. And now he's producing force into trunk rotation, but the band wants to cause him to unrotate. So he has to be able to control that force and at the same time make use of the hip mobility that we gained and demonstrate that he can control that. Of course.
So Greg, if I can just jump in here for a moment.
Sure.
Obviously, as you're going through this video, you're explaining what's going on. But if you were training Cam there, would you be cueing him all the way through the movement, or would you be letting him feel the movement so he can figure it out for himself?
I would be doing the latter. I would give him a task and a cue. I'd say, Cam, hold this band up overhead and then stand up from that split squat position and return to the start position. You've got one job, Cam, and that's not fall over. If you fall over the first time, that's okay. I'm going to give you 3 more repetitions. Just don't fall over the second time or the third time or the fourth time. So I simply gave him a command, stand up, don't fall over. And now he will figure that out. We can change the line of pull. We can change the hands position. And there is a real strength in this changing up. I can find out which hand on which angle he has the most stability and which lower body pattern he has the most stability with. That tells me which diagonal aspect of his core has a motor control problem. So this,
so you're telling me that it doesn't mean that sorry, Greg, it doesn't mean that his rotator cuff is weak on that side.
It doesn't mean any particular part at all. It means his body is behaving in an inappropriate way compared to how it behaves in the other diagonal patterns. So we're not reducing it down to parts.
And that would be a whole pattern, a whole body approach rather than just an isolation approach.
Absolutely. What you'll tend to find is that if there is an isolated part issue, it tends to be brought back into the fold. It tends to be stimulated to improve its function by being assisted by the whole body part. Now, if I take the band away and just put a kettlebell in play, it also destabilizes. It's less specific than the direction of the band because we don't know which particular diagonal pattern is not working so great. That's okay. I don't particularly mind too much. So where he doesn't have a band that he could use at home, he could take a kettlebell and run this same split squat pattern. The kettlebell's job is to destabilize him while he does a split squat pattern. I can make it more challenging by placing the kettlebell further away from the center of mass. So the area that we're interested in rehabilitating here is that pelvis and hip area. If the weight is further away from the pelvis and hip area, it's more destabilizing.
Something worth pointing out here too, Greg, is that kettlebell in this case is used as what we call a pattern assist. It's not actually the same as trying to strengthen something.
Yeah,
so we're not trying to strengthen his shoulder there.
We weren't strengthening his shoulder. We're using it to destabilize. Therefore, it's assisting him to regain control or regain stability. I'm going to take that video, Jeff, back just a small amount here. If we put him into that split stance position here, you'll see that he needs to demonstrate mobility of the anterior chain of that down leg. And he's got a hip flexed position on the up leg. Now, if he doesn't do this pattern very well, we can put him into that same setup and now apply a stretch in that same pattern. And this is called the Bretzel. And we ask him to breathe through this position to demonstrate that his body feels comfortable with that pattern. And once that's occurred, we can then get him back up into that weight-bearing pattern and rerun that same motor control drill. We can check whether he has an asymmetry between the left and the right side. You'll often find that when you go back down to the Bretzel and you reveal the asymmetry and you improve it, it allows your central nervous system to control that pattern much better. What we're really saying, Rod, is that we can change motor control by releasing the handbrake on the mobility problem. And we spoke about that earlier.
Absolutely.
Let's progress on to a different drill here. Still low impact conditioning and still motor control. Can he control his own body at 1 times body weight? Now we start to introduce a high knee walk. Let's look at what happening at the calf. He's doing a calf force production. 1 times body weight. The grabbing of the knee or the shin, this is called a leg cradle, forces him onto one leg, so that's a balance challenge. So he has to demonstrate that he can maintain postural integrity. He gets a calf raise. So if you love calf raises for calf injuries, you can still do them with those 2 drills. Now we're asking him to demonstrate the hip mobility that we've regained with some of these earlier drills. These now might become part of his 20-minute movement preparation when we return to running. We can make the drills more challenging. We're introducing that posterior chain elongation, but his pelvis is being challenged to maintain postural integrity. They're self-limiting because if he does lose balance, his body recognizes that immediately and he reorganizes himself to regain control. So it's both revealing of motor control problems and it's both enhancing of motor control simply by the nature of our coaching. What I said to Cam is you've got to walk that distance doing this drill, approximately 10 meters, and I'm going to only give you 4 errors. You are only allowed to lose your balance on 4 occasions. So after the first occasion of losing his balance, the competitive spirit in him says, well, I've only got 3 more. I'd better find a way to not lose balance. And his body starts to reorganize himself, which means he starts to improve his motor control. I get to make fun of him, of course, when he loses balance, and that creates a bit of fun and levity. And of course, if somebody smiles and laughs, then they breathe. And if they breathe, you're resetting the nervous system for motor control, which is what we want. We could progress the motor control drill to in a wall load and lift, and we could switch it to a marching switch. Now we do a marching drill and we're introducing low level impact. We've still got isometric calf contraction here. And we've got motor control through the trunk. We go to a faster switch and the impact through the ankle and the calf is slightly higher. He gets to choose when he's ready for those levels of impact. We can also challenge this split squat pattern with an asymmetrical load, and now it's heavier. I might use this for higher levels of conditioning. His heart rate is likely to be higher. We give him a command, Cam, stand up. Do a reverse lunge. Don't let the ball disturb your neck position and spine position. Tell him little jokes so he smiles and breathes. If we look at it from a side-on point of view or a posterior point of view, we're going to be able to keep an eye on when he loses motor control. Now he gets to choose when he puts the ball down. Cam knows the rules. If his head or neck deviates to the side, that means that he lost control of his ability to maintain posture. So his cue is when you lose control of posture, you have to put the ball down. It tells us that your fatigue has altered your motor control and you need to finish the drill. He still has good alignment. Now watch the neck. That's when he lost control. He puts the ball down. We're challenging to maintain control under fatiguing conditions. We're continuing this trend of low impact conditioning and motor control training, but now we've added greater than body weight. So we do a resisted walking. We can see that the calf is getting challenged. And we've got a sled drag. The two hand positions, let me tell you why they are important. You can go hands behind neck or you can go arms overhead. The girl on the front had a shoulder dislocation, and so she's preferring that hand position at the moment. The other girl doesn't have a shoulder issue. She goes straight overhead. Both of these patterns are glenohumeral joint on shoulder, or let's call it upper girdle, upper shoulder girdle. They are extension patterns. They're external rotation, and the whole upper quarter is extended. And what that does is it stimulates reflex stability. So extension of the whole upper quarter, including the thoracic spine, stimulates reflex motor control of the thorax. So you've got a stable thorax with a dynamically mobile and controlled lower quarter.
So just not to be confused there, it is flexion at the GH joint, we know that, but it's an extension pattern of the spine, including those upper quarters.
Correct. Glenohumeral joint shoulder flexion, but shoulder girdle is retracting, it's upwardly rotating, and the thorax is extending, and so we call that in general an extension pattern. And of course, we've now introduced that stepping movement through the calf, and so the ground reaction force is increased. All right. We can introduce lateral stepping, or it's very similar to that forward march. It's still at body weight, but if you add a load over the hand, it's slightly above body weight. Now, the challenge with the stick is that you have to introduce quite a strong hip flexion. We know that when you introduce strong hip flexion on one side, it stimulates hip extension and hip abduction on the opposite side. This is very important for a person who's had a lower limb distal injury. Distal injuries lead to motor control changes proximally in the pelvis and hip area. So this drill introduces that cross flexion and extension pattern at above body weight. Also, you can see that the ball overhead is similar to the kettlebell earlier. It's far away. It's quite a large distance from the area of interest. And so the further away the weight is, then the greater the stability challenge to that pelvis and hip area. Beautiful little low impact conditioning drills that also have many hidden benefits. So by day 4, knowing that he's done some green zone training or T2 to T4 zone training on day 3, we bring his training back down a level and we do a lower impact or a lower intensity session. He's got 20 minutes to do a selection of any of those drills, and then he goes for an incline walk again, or if he feels up to it, he can introduce some jogging. On day 5, I reintroduce heart rate zones within T1 to T4. We challenge him to now add 2 more repetitions for each working area. Sorry, not working area, for each interval. He'll do 10 repetitions taking 5 minutes instead of 8 repetitions taking 4 minutes. We reduce his recovery down from 2 minutes to 1. We ask him to repeat that entire spread of 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. I'm sorry, 5-1, 5-1, 5-2. He can repeat that twice or even 3 times if he's feeling very good. He gets some autonomy over this session. Again, we bring him down to a low intensity zone for a mild recovery. We want to prepare him for stepping up the intensity on the following days. We still challenge him to do all of those movement preparation drills, the motor control drills. I want to talk about some of the activities that we could introduce that would be challenging his anaerobic energy systems. So if it's red, it's going to challenge his calf for power endurance. And these are the activities that are likely to bring his heart rate up to higher zones. I've separated that bottom table into medium impact, normal impact, and high impact conditioning options. They're all above body weight. There are skipping options. There are lateral movement options like karaoke. There's forward skipping. There's athletic sprinting drills known as A marching and A skipping. Stiff ankle bounds is effectively where you're running forward, but your knee doesn't actually bend at all. So you're simply bouncing off the midfoot and forefoot. This introduces a much higher stress on that calf complex. Now, the wall drills that you saw Cameron do before, you saw him switching from a simple marching movement to a switch, which is where he very quickly changed weight-bearing status. You could do a switch, which is where he changes weight-bearing status and immediately comes back off it. That's called a double. And you can do a switch, which is a triple. Of course, normal impact, which means more than medium, is continuous running or even interval running. Okay. And then, of course, the higher impacts would be accelerating, sprinting, jumping, hopping, and bounding. So how do I program this into his training session, knowing that he's approaching the need to go back to football training? What happens is we get him to do a heart rate driven movement preparation like he's done before. And now we do a minute in the green zone, 2 minutes in the red zone, and 2 minutes back in the green zone again. Now, the reasons behind this particular method is that I want to get him up into an anaerobic lactic or alactic zone, which is going to introduce some higher runs. But now he's likely to be a little bit fatigued, and it's in those fatiguing conditions that I want to keep him working, but not as hard as he was during the red zone. So the activity that he does, if you look at you'll see there in red text is 1 minute, 2 minutes, 2 minute, and then 2 minutes recovery. If you go to the line immediately above that, you'll see that it says that we asked him to do running intervals with a football. So for 15 seconds, he ran with a football, and then he had 15 seconds of rest. He did 2 repetitions. We wanted him to run fast enough that he got his heart rate into a zone of between 146 and 179 beats per minute. After he did 2 repetitions of that, we asked him to run with a football, but faster, so that by the end of 4 repetitions, his heart rate was above 179. There's always a bit of a heart rate recording delay after the exercise that you do. Then we said run slower so your heart rate comes back down into that zone of 146 to 179. Keep the football in hand. Bounce the football if you want to. Kick it at the end if you want to. Then he gets a full 2 minutes recovery where we want his heart rate to come back down beneath 146. Now he gets to repeat that as many times as he wants based on how he's feeling.
So during the 2 minute recovery, is he doing anything there?
That's a walking recovery usually.
Cool.
Yeah, you can grab a drink. At that point in time, I'd also be rechecking. How's the calf feeling? Does it feel different to the other side? Do you have any pain? Often the precursor to the calf not tolerating any further training is that the individual says, I'm starting to feel that tightening up on that side compared to the other. We can't be driven by ego here of saying we want to keep going. If he's tightening up on that side, we give him the 2 minutes recovery. We pay attention to how it feels. If it's not quite fully reduced in its tightness, I might bring him back to just low level jogging or incline walking so that he can still do some conditioning but not push on. As it turns out, he didn't have any fatigue or tightness in that calf as he went through 3 rounds of this. We then get him back into the pool for an off legs conditioning session, and we send him back on day 9 to another challenging run. On this occasion now, he gets to join in some football drills. This would be by himself without other teammates impacting him. He might be kicking to another teammate or handballing to another teammate, interacting with them, but he's not involved in uncontrolled drills. So he's effectively running 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off, He's doing that twice, so he goes for a minute. Then he has to go faster for 2 minutes and then back down to a slower rate for another 1 minute and then 30 seconds and 30 seconds. Now, where it says 1 minute and 30 seconds, these are 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off. The reason that I've separated that last 3 greens is because it's likely that he's having to slow down to keep his heart rate into that zone. Day 10, he has a rest day. He's been doing something solidly for 9 days. Day 11 happens to be match day, not day 12. And what happens now is we go back and revisit. What we did was manual therapy and other treatment modalities to restore lost mobility and treating pain, as per the assessment findings. We've done corrective exercises to restore control of mobility at below body weight, at body weight, and above body weight. We've progressively loaded the calf within whole body movement patterns. We've maintained aerobic conditioning, and we've progressed that. All of those drills are challenging motor control, and we've used outcome measures to tell us about his competency of movement and his capacity. Because it's not an isolated calf problem, it's a multiple pattern person problem, noticed primarily by the athlete as a calf pain.
What I would say here too is if you haven't seen this approach before, perhaps go back with that slide in mind, have a look at the exercises and the approach that Greg's done, and have a look at how many of those things are being addressed at any one time during those exercises. And what you'll find is with this full pattern approach, Greg's actually influencing multiple areas at the same time, but doing what he needs to do for each particular area. So for the thorax, the motor control aspect will be emphasized. For the lower limb, the posterior chain will be emphasized in some of those exercises. So if you can go back, you can actually see how Greg's putting it all together as an overall pattern approach rather than trying to isolate each individual bit.
Yeah, and you will have seen many of those exercises before. I chose those exercises because they revealed something and because they produced something that I needed to change. And we could only do that by having an evaluation that told us what needed to be changed. And then understanding that the hierarchy says protect, correct, and maintain or develop. Address mobility before you expect motor control to change. Addressing mobility and motor control is often going to demonstrate a change in your capacity. And that's not a theory, because that was proven on this occasion and in many others like it. So that's a bridging the gap between, I guess, injury all the way through to performance using a functional movement systems approach and using the alternative physiotherapy strategies to a calf injury. You'll notice that at no time did we do calf raises, which is advocated as something that people must do after they have a calf injury. And not in no circumstance did I say to him, we've got calf raises to do today. We had
let's just say, Greg, let's say you didn't use calf raises in isolation. You always use it with other whole body pattern movements.
Yeah. And there's one important reason. If you train a calf raise, it doesn't guarantee that a pattern will improve. If you train a pattern that includes a calf raise, then you guarantee that the pattern gets better because of the cues that you use to make it get better, and the calf raise gets included in it. But it's not specifically just addressing the calf raise. So thanks very much for listening and paying attention to that instructional video about bridging the gap using the functional movement systems approach and alternative physiotherapy strategies for calf injuries. Rod, we'll see you on the next video.
Bye for now, everyone.